Hey everyone, and welcome to this next installment of Three OG Coaches. I'm Bridgette, and I'm here with Sass and Leanne, as always. Say hello, hello, hello.
Hi.
I wanted to get right into today's topic, which I think we're all salivating to dive into. And what I called it is it's not all in your head. The problem with mindset dominant coaching approaches. And so that's what we're going to get into today. And so I'll kick off with a couple of thoughts that I have about this, and then I think we'll have a very rich discussion. And uh, and actually, do I want to start with I don't want to start with a story, but I do have a little story about this. But the first thing that I want to say is that anything that we lean into too heavily, that we try to make sure that we try to have make sure has a universality to it that is useful in any situation. Any tool I think is problematic, except for maybe like breathing, right? There's some that are
Yeah.
universal, but any sort of tool that we're trying to give it a global coverage is problematic. And so I want to say right out of the gate that I am not anti-mindset tools. And by mindset tools, I am talking, or thought-based tools, I'm talking primarily about Byron Katie's The Work, Brooke Castillo's The Model, even cognitive behavioral therapy is another thought-based tool. And what else is there any other obvious? I think those are sort of the obvious ones.
Mm, mm.
And um, so I'm not saying there's not a place for that, because I will tell you, as a new coach, it really blew my mind the first time that somebody said to me, not everything you think may be true. And I was like, what? What is that? I mean, that's big. That is a big idea. And it's true. Not everything you think is true. And there's a lot of power in being able to sort of take what you're thinking and look at it a little bit more objectively and maybe see if there's a different way to think about a situation. 100% in favor of that. Do it all the time in my coaching. I think if you're a coach, you're kind of a natural reframer of your own thinking and of other people's thinking. So nobody should feel uh, bad about working in the realm of thought or anything like that. But there are some problems with these models. And I think it's really important to understand where they can be used and where they should not be used. And that everything doesn't fit neatly into a model. And so one of the problems I have with these models is that, like take Brooke Castillo's model, for instance. There's this idea that, circumstances flow linearly into thoughts, which drive your actions, which then drive results. Well, that's good on paper, but our circumstances don't always drive our thoughts. Sometimes our nervous system drives our thoughts. Sometimes it's there's not a linearity to who we are as human organisms. And the other thing that mindset dominant approaches don't take into account is, I think of the medicine wheel, like mind, body, heart, and spirit. And so a thought-based tool is a great intervention at the level of the mind. But there are other interventions that we can make. We can intervene, and intervene is probably not even the right word, but we can create shift. We can explore at the body level, at the spirit level, at the heart level, right? There's ways that we can create change for ourselves in all of those places. So I think to lean in heavily into the mind is to miss these other opportunities for shift. And that's why sometimes, you see people, well, I tried to change this thought and I tried to change this thought and I tried to change this thought. And it's like, well, you gotta come at that from a different way. And then I think the biggest issue that I've seen, and the one that is really upsetting, and Byron, Katie, I'm looking at you, is thought-based models do not take trauma into account. And so when I hear Byron, Katie, talking to a sexual abuse survivor, and this really happened, my partner went to this show or this program, and saying, so her thought is he abused me, and she's trying to say, turn it around to I abused him. No, that, so we can't change, we can't turn it around with trauma, not in that way. And that is, I feel very serious about it, because I've seen a lot of harm done when people try to have somebody shift their thoughts when they're talking about deep trauma. So, so now I'll tell you a little story and then I'm going to throw it open. When I was a new coach, I had the wheels just come off of a session. And I've told this story a lot of times in a lot of different contexts, because I learned so much from it. But what had happened is this poor woman had just lost her job, and she was very raw and very upset. And so what do I come in as a new coach, and I try to do the work with her. So it's like, I don't even know what I did. I can't remember, because honestly, I have blanked big parts of this out. But it was something like, I lost my job. Is that true? And she's like, yeah, I fucking lost my job. Or, it feels terrible. And I'm like, it feels terrible. Is that true? And just ham-handedly, when really what I could have done is just witness this woman's experience and say, oh my gosh, it's so devastating. Like, I don't need to shift this woman from anything. I can just witness her experience and say, oh, and listen, and then go from there and see what opens up. But because that's what I thought I was supposed to be doing, I went into thought work, and then I'm trying to do what I think should be done, and I'm not being of service to this woman. And so I just like stopped the whole session and referred her out. And honestly, I just hope she found somebody who could, do a better job with her. But I tell that story because that's what happens when we get so attached to a model and so attached to what we think we should do, that we're really not showing up and being of service to the client. And that's the number one thing. And we don't have to get, there's a bug if you're watching on YouTube, and we don't have to get fancy about it. Okay, so I said a mouthful. I'm going to battle this bug while you guys chime in.
I really appreciate you saying how, like, just the idea that you could question your own thoughts blew your mind. I had the same experience, Bridge. I was just like, are you kidding me? Like, this feels like miraculous to me. Like, I think I've cracked adulthood now. I can just move on,
Yeah.
There was a real kind of almost smugness to it. Like, I thought, oh, I can survive anything now, which I adore my fresh coach self for believing. And yeah, isn't it funny how when we as trainee coaches discover these approaches and tools, I think there's an understandable temptation to almost abandon our own agency and give the power to the tool. Right.
Yes.
And I've really seen that. I've worked with a lot of coaches who are kind of recovering life school coaches, who've come out
Yes.
of that that obsession with the model and all of that. And I think it's helpful, right, to slow down and look at what are the beliefs that I have and are they helpful? And maybe it would be useful to kind of explore that and maybe look at it. Um, but I think what can happen when you stay at that sort of surface level is we're not really looking at, well, where did this belief come from? Like it's arisen from somewhere, usually past experiences, right? And yeah, sometimes traumatic experiences. I've sort of seen over the years, like when I first started coaching, there was almost this delineate, like a sort of false delineation. Therapy looks at the past, coaching looks at the present and the future. And I think what that, it's a sort of false premise, really, right? But I think what that did was mean we were quite reluctant, it's particularly for those of us who want to stay in a kind of ethical frame. We're like, oh, okay, as long as I don't go down the past, I'm good, right? Like I'm staying with what's okay. And I think what that meant was that we only stayed in the present with the current thoughts and didn't maybe occur to us until we've done this for a bit that actually those thoughts and beliefs are coming from somewhere, and maybe it would be more helpful for the client to investigate, well, what's your theory about why you believe this? Like, where might this have come from? Did you learn it from somewhere? Like, just a bit more of a human conversation around what's going on rather than that sort of rigid deployment of a tool going, right, I'm going to throw this grenade in there, it's going to blow everything open, and you're going to go, man, you're amazing because you know this and I didn't. And I found after a while, having followed Byron Katie's stuff and a bit of Brooke stuff, I've never trained with Brooke, but Byron Katie's work was a big part of the Martha Beck training when I went through the school in 2012 or 13, around that time. So I would use it for everything because that was kind of that was the
That was how we
mantra,
were trained.
right?
Yeah.
Question everything. And after a while, it kind of left me feeling, I wouldn't say depressed, but there was a real flatness to life. Like I just felt like, well, nothing means anything. It really impacted me, like quite spiritually. I just thought, what's the fucking point then? If all our thoughts are just made up rubbish. Um, and I found myself going through the process of the Byron Katie work as a sort of intellectual game, already going, oh, well, this is how I would turn it around before I'd even looked at it. So any kind of purpose or helpfulness that I might have gained from that process, I sort of lost because I wasn't really in it. I was just trying to avoid this current situation, the thing that I thought I had created. So I sort of found that it exacerbated a lot of my self-doubt. It didn't actually bring me peace or serenity, and which is the promise, right? And and I just want to say, like, I was so taken with this. I then went and trained as a REBT therapist, so a rational emotional behavioral therapist, which is very wedded to that kind of structural approach to coaching. Um, and that led me to a bit of an existential crisis. Like, what am I even doing? I don't even think I want to be a therapist. What have I done? Sort of thing. So I spent like a good 18 months going down that train in a really full way. Now I would say that kind of work plays quite a small part in my practice. It's a helpful approach in some circumstances. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I liken it to, I mean, there's Bridgette, having a cough drop right now because she doesn't want to cough on our call. And that's how I often talk about it to clients because it's so out there, right? So you often get clients coming with this um, exposure to some kind of thought work. And, or I'll say, yeah, there's like nothing wrong with it at all.
Mm.
It's to me like taking cough medicine when you have a cold. It's like If you have, if it gives you some relief, if it helps you relieve that cough for a while, good stuff. But then let's also talk about how we can strengthen your immune system. So maybe you don't get a cold as often. So that's kind of the metaphor I would use. It's like, yeah, it's not terrible. But like, so we've all talked about how this was a huge part of the Martha Beck training. And I remember, so I was always a bit jaded about it from the start because of my background in developmental psychology. But so when I started going and watching all these videos of Byron Katie doing the work with people at her different events. So Byron Katie's on the stage and she's talking, and then somebody from the audience gets up and they have a problem and they're invited up onto the stage and they come sit beside her and she goes and does her process with them. And it's always like quite glorious. And as soon as I watched them, I was like, how come everybody thinks it's about this step-by-step process that Byron Katie has of like, is it true? Can you absolutely know that it's true? Or I can't even remember all the steps because I rarely use it. But I was watching Byron Katie. I wasn't listening. I was like, look at how she is. Look at her energy. She's calling people honey all the time. She's reaching over and touching their hand. She's like being this warm presence as they're sitting beside her in this very comfy chair on the stage. And I was like, we're giving all the power to this technique when I think we're underestimating how powerful it is to sit beside another warm, caring human being who's reaching across and holding your hand and calling you honey, and how powerful that is when you're going through something that feels really hard. And so that was what really struck me. I remember when I was doing the Byron or the Martha Beck training, and I would go watch. I was like, so what's the deal with this Byron Katie? And then the other thing was that Brooke was the head honcho when I went through. And she was the person who was like reviewing all of our, well, I don't know if anybody else actually sent them in besides me, because the technology back then to send a recorded coaching call from a phone, I remember there being like 5 steps to it. I had this little machine that I had to plug into my headset. And so I don't know if anybody actually was sending Brooke audio recordings of their calls besides me. But I would send Brooke these calls because I thought I paid a lot of money for this. I'm getting my money's worth. Like I'm going to get some feedback. But then it became quite clear to me that all she wanted to see was me doing the technique. And I was like, well, this is useless. I mean, I knew how to do it and I would do it. And then she'd say, oh, that was wonderful. Or even if it wasn't on a tape, if it was just we used to coach each other in these practice calls. And you'd be like, going a certain direction or whatever. And then it would be like, oh, Brooke is there kind of nudging you to, well, what about, back to the thought work, and then of course, it's not surprising that she took that and turned it into her, I'm guessing, I don't know what her process is, but it sounds like it's a lot like Byron Katie's stuff. Is it? Yeah. So, that she made that kind of her thing. And it occurred to me, that Sass was sending me a couple little articles about, I've been reading a book about, well, I've been reading quite a few books about the romantic reaction to the Industrial Revolution. And
as one does.
Fun.
For funsies.
Yeah.
And yeah, right. Okay. So Sass had sent me an article and I said, oh my gosh, this thing just twigged for me. It's like, this is like minimalist coaching. It's like, and then I was on my walk this morning thinking about us having this talk and I was like, it's actually like AI coaching. It's like it's like, there's no part of our heart and soul that meets the heart and soul of our client. It's just this very formulaic bang, bang, bang. You ask this question, then this question, then this question. And I was like that could be an AI doing that.
Yeah.
Not a human being.
Leanne, I love that you raised this because I wrote that down as well. Like,
oh, did you?
Why, yeah, like I think this is why there might be some trepidation and fear around how AI may insert itself into the coaching world. And it's perfectly placed for this kind of thing.
Yeah.
But again, where's the empathy?
Where's the hand reaching across and holding another hand?
Yeah.
Even metaphorically,
There's
even,
no warm presence there.
no,
Yeah.
no.
Yeah.
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 Well, and it it goes to another level of that too, when it's a way to bypass your emotions. It can be a way to explore your emotions. Again, it's all in how you utilize it, but I mean, back in the day, it was just, well, how do you feel? Check, check, check. I feel this, that, and the other. And feelings are their own universe and their own realm,
Mhm.
and they're not just to be gotten rid of. And there's not another thing that I think is problematic is this whole idea. It kind of comes out of law of attraction, is there's like good emotions and bad emotions, and they're on a scale. And so if you feel rage, you're at a -14, and if you feel joy, you're at a plus 112, whatever it
Interesting.
is. And so you want to vibrate at this certain vibration that is high. And it's like all of that is, to me, trying to transcend the human experience.
Hmm.
And ultimately that's what I decided, is I wasn't actually interested in enlightenment or transcendence, or I love transcendent moments, sure, but I want to embody and
Hmm.
be in. And I was thinking too, Sass, as you were talking about the life coach school kind of refugees that you've worked with, and I've worked with some too. And here's another thing that happens to practitioners that I see is there's this dynamic where somebody will be telling me about their experience and their feelings and what happened, and they'll go, well, I know that's just my thoughts. That's just my thoughts. And
Oh,
that's just my thoughts. And so I would just spend so much time to just say, it's that's why I said this is not just your thoughts. This is your lived experience that you don't have to deny or bypass or get rid of, like, or explain or
hmm.
shift. This is
Hmm.
real, and let's talk about it, and let's talk about how you feel about that without you feeling like you have to skip over
Hmm.
that because it doesn't have a validity, because it's wrong or negative or whatever you're making it out to be. So it can really do a head trip on
Hmm.
a coach or a practitioner, where you don't allow yourself to be with what's real for
Hmm.
you.
Well, and that is, a form of what we'd probably now recognize as gaslighting ourselves, right? Like,
Yeah.
and actually, remember, gaslighting has come into the vernacular as a way of understanding, look, this is a form of coercive control, right? When we gaslight another person, we are trying to manipulate their interpretation of their own experience so they agree with us. And
Yeah.
so understanding it from that perspective, it's like, as a coach, that feels completely not okay for me to participate in any way.
Hmm.
And yeah, so I have also been quite reassured about there's a sort of increasing body of research that's looking into things like affirmations. Like, do they work? Was Louise Hay onto something, and and the general consensus is not really, right? It doesn't actually, it is, very much the minimalist aspect of things. You can end up trying to convince yourself of something that your heart is telling you, I don't believe this. And so
Hmm.
I look at this from the angle of self-doubt, because often folks will say, well, I just want to feel confident. So I'm going to almost try and convince myself that that I am these things that actually I don't fundamentally believe that I am. And so it creates this kind of schism, which
Hmm.
can exacerbate self-doubt. Like, actually, I'm trying to convince myself of something that I really in my heart don't quite believe is true. I can't embody it. And so, eradicates like self-trust. Because I
Yeah.
can't really count on myself because I'm telling myself what is effectively a lie to try and coerce myself into believing something that I don't.
Yeah, and it's a bridge too far. I mean, going back to Leanne, what you were saying about Byron Katie, I think Louise Hay was very similar. What did she do? She
Yeah.
went among gay men in San Francisco in the height of the AIDS crisis and held their hands and said, "You are beautiful, you are whole, you know, I love you and you are lovable." And I'm just getting chills because I think that is so real and true, you know. So I don't think it was necessarily the words she was saying, but the being there, you know, when people didn't even understand exactly how AIDS was transmitted, and then expressing love and acceptance to these men who had nobody. Like that is what she did, you know. And
Yeah.
and then to try to extrapolate that out. So it's interesting. I think sometimes the people try to capture like what is the magic of this, but the magic is the magic. You know, the
Yeah.
magic is
Well,
is
I
in your
think
presence.
in your presence and your, you know, willingness, as you were just, you know, describing, Bridgette, to be in the field of emotion. And emotion literally means to be moved. Emotion is there to move us so that we can also be moved into our own, you know, emotion is what grows us up. If you don't have emotion, you don't grow up. So when you're doing cognitive behavioral therapy, if you're doing it to avoid or trying to bypass the emotional state, you're keeping yourself stuck in a more immature place.
Yeah.
So,
I'm wondering, it's just occurring to me as I'm listening to you both describe Byron Katie, Louise Hay, these maternal, loving figures. I feel that like a genuine, and it's taken me a while to get here for my own, because of my own history, but that genuine feeling of love for my clients, that I am just like, I am no longer calling that unprofessional. I'm like, that's actually the state I'm coaching from
oh
all the
God, yeah.
time. Like love is the thing that is fueling this work for me.
100%.
And I'm curious about, why do we think that's not enough? Why do we try and wrap tools and processes and frameworks around that loving presence that sits beside another human and says, what's happening? How are we going to figure this out together? You're not alone. You're lovable. Let's have a chat about it. Why do we think, is it
Can't charge $60,000 for that, or would a 30,000, whatever.
maybe, right? Can you?
Well,
Like,
that's the culture we live in, Sass.
Yeah.
You know, that's the culture. It's like, you got to have the product, you got to have the deliverable. You know, one of the most radical things Gordon, my mentor, Gordon Neufeld, said at one of the summer intensives that I went to with him was, he was like, there's a lot of pressure out there to, what did he call it? Oh my, sorry. I'm just like, not trademark, but
Productize or commodify.
give his thing a name and a like a specific, like, here's the
a framework or a model.
And
Like we're playing charades. Framework, model.
I'm trying to think of the word. I know that Kelly Deals, the big marketing coach and a friend of mine, she uses this. She has a program called methodology. That's the word.
right.
So he said, this is not a method. This is not a method. And he said, I don't want you to ever think this is a method, like see it through that lens. This is an understanding. This is a way of seeing other human beings, but there's no method here. There's no method. This is, you know, everything is nuanced and depends on each person's situation. And like, what is the thought that maybe somebody does have a really neurotic thought that that thought work actually helps them unhook from sometimes. Okay, great. In that situation, then yeah. So finding that nuance. But yeah, the love thing is got to be there. The love is the perspective. Love is the perspective that we have to bring to our clients. I don't know, you know, for me, that was always clear because I think I was really lucky to be a teacher before I was a coach in many ways, because it was just a really broad experience, and I taught teenagers. So it was a space that was full of a lot of emotion and change and transition. And I used to say to myself, like, the teachers, what drove me most crazy being in the system was the teachers who clearly didn't love their students. I was like, if you don't walk in the classroom and love each of those kids in front of you, then what are you doing here? What are you doing here?
Well, and the thing about it is that love, that real unconditional love, like, you are a person in front of me, the glory of that, like, and I get to sit with you. Are you kidding me? That love, that real kind of heartfelt expression of that, you see past the behavior, you see past the unlovable parts. The behavior is like, it's a symptom. Like, who gives a shit? You know, and our culture is obsessed with changing behavior. And I think that this thought work stuff it's almost like, that's how I'll change my behavior. If I change my thoughts, I'll change my behavior. What if you weren't doing anything that you needed to make yourself wrong for? Right? Like, I think it's like we've got it backwards.
That's it. Exactly, Sass. Exactly. You just articulated it beautifully. I mean, that's why it's called cognitive behavioral therapy, right? Those are the two big stars. One is the thinking and one is the behavior. And that's what we're going to focus on, the cognitive behavior. And
you think about the kinds of behaviors that the majority of coaches, I'm just thinking, like, kind of universally, the majority of behaviors that we determine need to be changed is fascinating, right?
Or
we
our
need to
clients
lose weight
come to us
and make money. And, you know, so it's basically, as long as you're skinny, rich, and hot, you have value, right? Then you probably don't need to change many behaviors, right? But there's something about that feels incredibly out of alignment from my personal values. And I worry about that power dynamic stuff that gets replicated in coaching. You know, that so much of mainstream coaching is about reinforcing these deeply flawed aspects of our world, you know, about who gets access to resources, what power looks like, who you need to be to obtain that. And, you know, a lot of this mindset's behavioral stuff reinforces all of that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that was
Gosh, I'm on a rant now.
No, I mean, I think it's not culturally sensitive for that reason, and also for different cultural backgrounds and perspectives, right? So it is reinforcing this dominant paradigm in some way of how, which is what a lot of times we bring, you know. I think a lot of times what we're helping people with is, I know what I'm helping square people with is sort of that tension between how they think they should be in the world and who they really want to be. And so the thoughts aren't always out. It's more like, yeah, you're right, actually, or you should think that, or you should be upset about that. Or I say a lot, you know, you come by that honestly, because that was the survival mechanism, that you created when you were little to navigate life. And so it's not wrong. It's just, is that serving you now? And do you want to make other choices? And that's just a lot more expansive. And on that love bit, I'm just thinking of coaches out there, they're saying, oh, I don't show up in love, and like, don't make yourself wrong. It's just that when I'm thinking about what tool do I use, when I used to think, what do I do here? What tool do I use? Or trying to follow a rule, because we're all trained up, you better get in there and get the thought and create the transformation in the first 20 minutes, which is like totally made up. It's
Yeah.
totally made up, and it's
Yeah.
made up out of one person's ego in that period of time.
Mhm.
You know, and I think
Mhm.
I've talked about this on past calls, but my clients usually for the first 5, 10, 15, 20, half hour, like it's a download, and they're downloading like what is happening, and I'm listening, and then we're getting to what
Mhm.
is important, you know, to them to work through or talk about. And so I just think any of those places where you're feeling constrained as a coach, like that would be a great place to examine your beliefs.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And if
Yeah.
that is separating you from just showing up in presence and love
Mhm.
for this
Mhm.
person and going from there.
Yeah. And I think, this love is it's, I remember I was doing Jen Loudon quite a few years ago had a course called Teach Now. And I don't know what I did something for it. I don't remember. I've done a lot of these little like one-offs for people here and there. And I said something about loving my students. And Jen was kind of like, well, I don't know about everybody in here, but I certainly don't love everybody who shows up. She was like, that's not possible for me. Like people are going to irritate me.
Mm.
And I was like, oh yeah,
Mm.
kids, I taught many students who irritated me. That's not what we're meaning here. We're not meaning gushy romantic love. We're not meaning uh namby-pamby, soft and fuzzy love. We mean love as a force of what and I think I've said this on this call before because it's one of my favorite little mantras from Marion Woodman, which is love is loving the acorn without knowing what the oak tree is.
Yes.
It's a love of the person's potential, of their
Yes.
own unfolding. You don't have to love them like like
Mm.
Yeah.
you don't have to have like a sense of like, oh, I want to be this person's best friend. No,
Yeah.
not
Mm-mm.
at
Yeah.
all. Not at all.
Yeah.
We're talking about
Yeah.
love in this broader context. And maybe it's a shame that we don't have more nuanced words for
Mm.
love, but we're
Mm.
talking about, what Socrates said when he said about one of his students, I could not teach him because he did not love me. Like
Mm.
there's a
Mm.
sense of like there has to be this sense of human this like yes, there has to be this
Yeah.
sense of the human that you're
Yeah.
we have enough successful people in the world. We don't need to help people be more successful. We need to help more people be more human, be
Yeah.
more their human selves, reach their full human potential, not their
Yeah.
commercial potential.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Because
that was me going on a bit
no,
of a
I love
rant.
this. But
No,
you're
I'm here for it.
reminding me of there are different words for love, right? There is that limerence, which is that
Yes,
romantic,
yes,
sparkly, oh, the
yes,
butterflies feeling. And there is
yes,
eros, right? Which is they're all Greek.
yes,
All the best stuff's Greek. And eros, which is like sexual love. But there
yes,
is something, I can't remember the word for it, but
Agape.
there is
yes, agape. Yeah,
agape. Yeah.
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 That's what we're talking about, I
Yes,
think.
exactly. Good
That
point. Yeah.
that real like it's an action, right? It's a showing up for the
Mm-hmm.
person. It's a even when you irritate the shit out of me and I feel myself judging you or you remind me of you because this is relational work, I'm still gonna love you. I still want the best for you. Like that kind of love is to
Mm-hmm.
be in the presence of that is I have that with my supervisor who I just adore. Like I feel her love for me and her
Yeah.
deep care for me. And
Yeah.
she is like the total like and she's a bigger woman in her 70s. She has this deep, slow pace. And I just so respect her. And I want to make her proud. Like there is that kind of loving connection there. She's a very maternal figure for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, yeah, I want to pass that on. What came to me as
Mm-hmm.
seed, I'll offer as my flower.
Yeah.
It's that kind
Yeah.
of, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think the other piece about seeds too, as I was in what we're talking about, and is instead of relying on models or frameworks or even ideas is this presence. And then I was thinking, Leanne, what you were talking about seeds, and it's so fascinating because each client, it's like, well, how can I help you grow? And what do you need? And I think of my garden, like what does the basil need versus what do the tomatoes need versus what are the carrots? And then it's also unique, what are the tomatoes over here in this variety, and that to me is the fun of how can I help this person grow? Because, they're doing it. That's the other thing is, we're not getting results for our clients. They're doing it. We are facilitating what's inside of them. And I think that's really important to remember too, is it's their work and their benefits and their outcomes. And I think believing in somebody's ability and capability is huge, just from a grounded place, not blowing smoke up somebody's ass, but showing up in a way that says, I believe in your potential, and let's find out what that is. Let's make that more conscious so that you can tend to it and grow it and lean into it. That's so fun. And it's like then you think of that and you go back to the thought work, and it's so sort of remote
jarring,
and removed and jarring and clinical,
detached almost.
I'm thinking about folks, our fellow coaches listening, and who may actually find, there's a security blanket in knowing I can do the thought work with someone. Like the tools are actually, what feels like that's the value of the work, right? And maybe we could close this with like what we recommend as a way of maybe broadening out from that sense of my work is valuable because of the tools I know. And just listening to you speak about the seeds, Bridgette, about what do the tomatoes need versus what does the basil need? And I'm thinking, well, how do we know what someone needs? We got to sink into our intuition, right? There's something like about accessing that place of stillness inside to what's bubbling up for me? What do I think might help? What do I feel might help? What do I know might help? And sometimes that might be, there's a great tool I've heard of that might help. Could we explore that, And sometimes it might be saying to a person, yeah, this is shitty. I'm with you in it. So I guess I wonder what each of you might say to someone who does want to broaden out from a tool-based approach.
Well, my answer is going to be, so first of all, the fact I always say the longing is the answer. So if you're feeling like you want to branch out from a tool-based approach, and honestly, if you've been using, different tools and techniques and that's how you have had to get going, just I trust that you're going to find, but you love coaching, you love it, and you get off calls and you're energized and you love the human sitting in front of you, then keep going because you'll naturally just shed those tools. I have no doubt. So the fact that you want to branch out from tools, the fact that you're listening to this podcast, I say, hey, it's happening. Don't even worry that much about it. Just keep going. So I'm not going to say like, do this, do that, do the other thing, but I'm going to say, trust where you already are at. Trust the fact that you're listening to us because something in what we're saying is resonating with you. That tells me that something's already shifting in you, and just trust that.
Yeah. The only thing I would add to that is I think what really took it in a deeper direction for me is just getting uncomfortable with those silences. Getting comfortable with those moments in a session where I'm like, I don't know where this is going. Because, and I live in that place now, I don't know where this is going. And I stopped worrying about where this is going. And it's just then it's not on me, it's not on me. And that gave me so much freedom. And so if you arrive in a moment where you don't know where it's going, just pause. Just say, well, oh, let's take a minute here and just let all that land. And sure as shit, something will come to your mind, something will come to the client's mind. Oh, this thing. You know, your clients have agency and intelligence and their own intuition, and they will, you know, so make that space for them to fill the gap as well.
Yeah,
You don't have to
beautiful.
carry them through. So I think just getting comfortable with the parts that are uncomfortable was big for me, because I was just gonna move. Sorry, I'm being attacked by a fruit fly. I was, I just was gonna move right through that because I was not comfortable with those parts, because I was making getting the client to a certain result my job, and my job is to just, I don't know, help facilitate their understanding.
Love
Yeah.
Any last thoughts on thoughts?
I just would say that, I think what you guys said and is so good, and I think what I would offer instead of the thought work is maybe the question, which is a very common coaching question too, but I think it relates to what both of you said around what to do instead of doing the thought work or something, is asking yourself and maybe asking your client, what are you thinking but not saying right now? Because sometimes we have the wisdom and then we're holding back because, as Sass said earlier, we think we're supposed to just follow the script. So when you get into that uncomfortable silence, maybe that's where you say, what am I thinking right now, but not saying to my client?
Yeah.
And it could be
toss it
something
into the
very,
mix.
it could be, and just say, and you don't have to give it a lot of weight. You can just be like, hey, this bubbled up for me. Tell me how this lands for you.
Yeah.
Exactly. I think
And
that was
sometimes
the other thing. Sorry, go ahead. I'm like
and
whacking
sometimes
my microphone
sometimes I
now.
do that and my clients go like, no, I don't think that's it. But you know what that made me think of was, and that, whatever, so it doesn't mean
you
you have
don't
to be
need to be
right.
Jinx, you owe me a Coke.
Love it.
That's it. I think that's the other thing that really set me free, is that I can throw something into the mix and I don't have to be right. And a lot of times I'm not keeping a tally of whether I'm right or wrong, because we're just finding, we're just traveling down the path together and seeing what we come up with. And that's it.
Yeah.
So,
and I love that that's what we do here too. We just come on these calls and we have no outline.
No idea.
And we just have a great conversation between three colleagues, friends, and it's fun. And we don't know where it's going to take us. So let these conversations maybe be a model for how you enter into your coaching conversations too.
Exactly.
I've loved this chat. This has felt like medicine. Yeah. I needed a rant, it turned out.
Right?
We all did.
Have
We
a little
all
rant every once in a while. All right. Thanks everyone for listening in. We really appreciate your time and attention and your comments and your feedback. And this is just a joyous little project for us. And we love that you all are playing along. So thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thanks.
We love you. Yeah. Thanks.